Well, we are continuing our summer sermon series on fruit, the fruit of the Spirit. Today we're looking at the idea, the concept of joy. So I invite you to answer in your own mind this question: what brings you the most joy in life? What brings you joy? Is it a relationship that you have? Is it an experience that you look forward to, perhaps once a year? Is it the embrace of a loved one, or the smile of a grandchild or great-grandchild? Is it a moment? Perhaps it's a memory. Perhaps it's music. There's a song that brings you joy. Maybe it's a food, maybe it's a fruit that when you sink your teeth into it, there's just delight. Maybe it's watching the Red Sox score 15 runs. Think about what brings you joy. Now, we know from the text, our kind of foundation text for this whole sermon series, from Galatians 5, known as the fruit of the Spirit. We know from Paul that one of the fruits of the Spirit is joy. And that means that one sign of being filled with God's Spirit means to have joy and exhibit joy. But how do we know what real joy is supposed to look like or feel like? Then again, is joy an emotion? Is it an emotional state? Or is it a state of mind? What is the source of your joy? What should be, what can be the source of our joy? Because as a side note, if it is the Red Sox scoring 15 runs, that doesn't happen very often. And probably won't happen today. But the same thing could be said of all those other things that maybe came to your mind. Theologian Howard Thurman writes on the most secure foundation of joy. He says, there are some who are dependent upon the mood of others for their happiness. There are some whose joy is dependent upon circumstances. There are some who must win their joy against high odds, squeeze it out of the arid ground of their living, or wrest it from the stubborn sadness of circumstance. There are still others who find their joy deep in the hearts of their religious experience. It is not related to, dependent upon, or derived from any circumstances or conditions in the midst of which they must live. He's talking about the joy independent of all vicissitudes. There's a strange quality of awe in their joy. That is but a reflection of the deep, calm water of the Spirit out of which it comes. It is primarily a discovery of the soul. When God makes known God's presence, where there are no words, no outward song, only the divine moment. This is the joy that the world cannot give. This is the joy that keeps watch against all the emissaries of sadness, of mind and weariness of soul. This is the joy that comforts and is the companion as we walk even through the valley of the shadow of death. And I have come to experience and believe and trust that this is the kind of joy, this deep, calm water, that Jesus talks about with his disciples and models for them, even in the midst of his own difficulties, of his own temptations, and even his own death. This is a kind of joy that truly the world cannot give, nor should we expect to find it in those other places, which are often fleeting and fickle. This kind of joy is truly a gift of God and a fruit of the Spirit, which I think is why the Apostle Paul had that number 2, right after love. It is so important and so necessary, but can be so challenging if we're trying to find it in the wrong places. Catholic priest Henry Nouwen writes of the joy we experience through the love of God. He says, "Joy is a gift that there is even when we are sorrowful, even when we are in pain, even when things are difficult in our lives. The joy that Jesus offers is a joy that exists in every very difficult situation." What we have to start sensing is that in the spiritual life, joy is embracing sorrow and happiness, pain and pleasure. It is deeper, fuller. It is more. It is something that reminds us of who we are, and it remains with us. It is something of God that is very profound. It is something we can experience even when we are in touch with very painful things in our lives. If there's anything the church wants to teach us, it is that the joy of God can be with us always. In moments of sickness, in moments of health, in moments of success, in moments of failure, in moments of birth, in moments of death, the joy of God is never going to leave us. I love those words. And I'm reminded of Jesus saying those similar words, "I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will be with you always." It's a promise of Jesus. And it's a promise of God's joy being with us in the midst of all of life's circumstances and situations, including the difficult ones. It's that kind of complete joy that allowed Horatio Spafford to pen those words. And I'm grateful that Greg shared some of the background to that hymn. "When sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Can you imagine him penning those words, inspired to write those words over that spot on the Atlantic where he lost the most precious people in his life? But I do believe he tapped into something. He was able to tap into joy, this gift, this fruit of the Spirit. The late Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu was no stranger to conflict, as you are all aware. He experienced conflict and hardship and loss throughout his entire life and his ministry. He focused his ministry on the fight against apartheid in South Africa. Desmond Tutu, along with the Dalai Lama, co-authored a wonderful book, which I highly recommend, called The Book of Joy: Lasting Happiness in a Changing World. And Desmond Tutu said, "We are fragile creatures, and it is from this weakness, not despite it, that we discover the possibility of true joy." So it's understanding and even embracing that we are fragile, we are frail, we have weaknesses, not trying to avoid those. I've lived in places where if you ask someone, "How are you doing?" and you know that they're not doing well, their answer will be, "Oh, I'm great. Life couldn't be better." Because there's this conception, a misconception, that everyone needs to be happy all the time. And there's this outward sign of having it all together, and not having any weaknesses is a sign of strength and inner fortitude and somehow connected to joy. But I don't think that's true. I think that's false, a facade. I think what Desmond Tutu is saying is that it's not despite our weaknesses, it's from our weaknesses and acknowledging those and living through those that we can discover the possibility of true joy. That in fact it's not dependent on our emotions or our emotional state of mind or what's happening around us or even based on other people. Perhaps that is the secret that people like Desmond Tutu and Jesus and the Apostle Paul understood, It could be that only pain and suffering can bring us to a place of true, complete, and lasting joy. Not necessarily happiness, which is a passing emotion, but joy, the quiet, deep-seated conviction that our lives make sense and that we have purpose and that we are loved unconditionally, completely. Maybe joy is actually not about us at all. Maybe it is about other people and how our lives can be used to bring joy to other people, to bring peace and health and wholeness and justice and shalom. In this same book, the Book of Joy, the Dalai Lama says these words, which I completely agree with. And I think Jesus would as well, because Jesus says basically the same things. He says, joy is the reward, really, of seeking to give joy to others. When you show compassion, when you show caring, when you show love to others, do things for others in a wonderful way, you have a deep joy that you can get in no other way. You can't buy it with money. You can be the richest person on earth, but if you care only about yourself, I can bet my bottom dollar you will not be happy and joyful. But when you are caring, compassionate, more concerned about the welfare of others than about your own, wonderfully, you suddenly feel a warm glow in your heart because you have, in fact, wiped the tears from the eyes of another. This, I believe, is what we all need, what the world needs, what we're longing for, what so many of us are striving for. And it's here. It's available. It's a gift. It's a fruit. And it's a low-hanging fruit. We can just grab it. This is the kind of joy that Jesus offers. He concluded that section that we read from John, talking about bearing fruit, and really all of his instructions to his disciples. He said, I have said these things to you. Why has Jesus said all this? Why has Jesus preached? What's the point? He says, I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be not temporary, not fleeting. Your joy may be complete. Jesus wants us to bear good fruit. We all want good fruit. You've probably had that fruit that has gone bad, and maybe the fruit flies are circling around it. It might be edible, but it's not very delicious. We all want good fruit, and we want to be good fruit for other people, for the world. A world which is starving and needs nourishment. And sometimes bearing good fruit, as Jesus says, requires pruning. Life has a good way of doing that for us. We all experience challenges. We all experience pruning. But that's okay. In fact, Jesus says that's the only way in which to bear good fruit, fruit that will last. Ultimately, in the end, it's all about joy. A few weeks ago, our board of directors had an all-day retreat at the Von Trapp Family Lodge and Resort. It was a wonderful opportunity for us to share our stories, to share who we are, our narratives, to look back on what God has done in this church over the years, God's faithfulness, and to look forward to years and years ahead. And we had these big sticky notes. It was kind of great. It was like an elementary school classroom. And it unleashed creativity and vision and energy. And this conference center, all around the room, we had Post-it notes, these really large Post-it notes and small Post-it notes. And we talked about vision and values and attributes and qualities of our congregation, things that we're proud of, things that we're excited about, things that are part of the central DNA of who we are. There's so many of them, but one word continued to come up, and it was the word joy. That when we gather together for worship, even when we're going through difficult times, that we experience something that, and sometimes it's hard to put a word on it, but I think the word probably is joy. That we leave those doors different, touched, changed, encouraged, empowered. We're connected because we have experienced the joy of the Spirit in our lives. That joy is ever before us, and that's the joy that will keep us going and keep us growing, and that's the joy that we have to offer to others, to your friends and neighbors and colleagues and family members and strangers and people that we don't even know yet. It's joy. It may seem naive in a world of grief to choose to live in joy. It may seem foolish in a world where solemnity is power to sing and dance to a different tune. But the good news is that Jesus has come to bring joy into our grief, light into our darkness, singing into our mourning. And it is an act of healing and proclamation to believe and embrace the joy that Christ offers and the Holy Spirit brings. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. He rules the world with truth and grace and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness and the wonders of his love. And the wonders of his love. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let heaven and nature sing. Now and always. Amen.